this is Dr. Supreet from Department of Commerce. So today we will be talking about international trade logistics and sourcing, and onto the same we will be talking about choice of mode of your transportation. Since we talked about a number of aspects with respect to your international trade logistics, and when we are talking about trade logistics, there are different things that one should take care of. And the one very prominent thing or the significant thing is that your choice of mode of transportation. Since we have a number of modes of your transportation rather, it could be your railways, it could be your airways, it could be shipping, or it could be the roadways. So when we are talking about the choice of mode of transportation, as said by the eminent management guru, that is Peter Drucker, he mentioned and he rather talked about the significance of role of your logistics into the management. So logistics is one thing which we hardly talk about, and rather it is one of the quintessential aspect of your entire international trade. So when we are talking about your logistics, we have to take care of number of elements, whether we are choosing the mode of transportation as your road, whether taking it up as railways or airways or the shipping even for that sake. So when we are talking about choosing from a number of mode of your transportation, there stands a number of your factors, right, which decide that what mode of your transportation should be opted. So the very first factor that we think upon when we are choosing from an alternative number of your or alternative mode of your transportation is the cost. So that is why it says whenever we are talking about choosing the mode of transportation, there is always standing a trade-off between your shipping time and your cost of transport, right? So the cost of transportation is very crucial, since if the cost of transportation is lower, then only will be going for such mode of transportation until or unless the other case being there, right? So for example, if there being the heavier bulk, right, if the cargo is such that the bulk is very heavier to go for, so we'll be definitely opting for your shipping. Reason being, shipping lines are comparatively you're having a lower transportation cost when it comes to carrying the heavier bulk, right? Similarly, whenever one wants that the goods are of such nature that they are to be delivered well in time, you could take an example of your newspapers, you can take an example of your food articles, for anything, or let's say fresh flowers, right? So in that case, more than the cost, what we look on to that, we look for the timely delivery. So that is why it is said that it is always a trade-off when opting from what sort of your mode of transportation to opt for, right? So we sort of create a trade-off that wherein that shipping time is also achieved, it is attained, and your cost of transport simultaneously is reduced. So that is why in case of your all these fresh flowers, in case of fresh fruits or your newspapers, if the nature of article being such, we opt for such mode of your transportation as your airways, where the delivery is ensured well in time. So when we are talking about choosing from different mode of your transportation, we always think upon that what will be our cost for the same. For example, if you want to send some parcel from Delhi to a place, let's say in France, so first thing that you will be thinking upon is that what will be my cost for the same, cost for sending a parcel, right? So accordingly you will be deciding upon your channel of your delivery, correct? And similarly you will also take into account that what is the time period it is taking for the channel to complete the delivery, right? If it is taking too long, so rather I would prefer to pay a little higher and then opt for a timely delivery of the package, right? Similar is the case in your this international trade logistics. When we are talking about that, when we are dealing into international trade, so we take care into account that this logistical thing that we are talking about, this logistical cost should be tapered down, but Also, we are very, cautious of the fact that the goods are delivered well in time, because we are serving the international markets out there. We are somehow indulged into the trade. So that is why the thing out there is, we always look onto a trade-off between your shipping time and your cost of transportation. And not just the shipping time and the cost of transportation, there are a number of other factors that one takes into account while choosing whatever mode of transportation is to be opted from, your railways or roadways or shipping or your airways, right? So let's suppose the third factor being there, apart from your cost and your timely delivery, is that we look into what is the nature of the article, or what is the nature of your cargo that you are sending for the for the export, right? So depending on to the same, what is your article, whether it is an article which requires the immediate delivery, that means newspapers, right? That means fresh flowers, that means fresh fruits, right? Or any other article which it is of utmost relevance that it should be transported well in time. But let's suppose I'm talking about any other commodity, let's suppose any metal articles, let's suppose any lighting articles, anything, any other equipment which I know can be sent, can be taken up for a longer period of time. So in that case, rather I'll be going for a shipping, right, instead of my airways, because then in that case of your shipping, your transportation cost will be reduced, and rather you can take the heavier bulk in one go, which otherwise is not that much feasible in case of your air transportation, or when talking about serving the international boundaries, in case of your at times it's not feasible from the railways also. So that is why the nature of product, it matters a lot. Then we are talking about the fourth parameter, is that your customer services. Now when we talk about customer services, since it is this ongoing process of LPG is there. Ongoing process means this liberalization, privatization and globalization that happened back in 1991, it is still into that process, it is on to the running process, right? So what happens out is that the goal is for what? The goal is for the sustainable development, the goal is for the economic development, wherein the the government, the administration keeps on undertaking number of activities for the same, and to improvise our international trade relations even. So when we are talking about that, we need to serve the international market, the one important aspect that always keep into mind is our customer services. So we need to provide the better services to the customer, right? To the customer means that if the delivery is slated to be delivered by, let's say, 22nd of August, so it has to be delivered well in time, because what will happen otherwise, since it is in a global market, right, there are number of competitors serving out there, right, and if you are not able to withstand your promises, your commitments, so that leaves a negative impression, right? So maybe the importer the very next time would not contact you, right? He would easily shift to the someone else, right? So if you are providing, if your USP is timely delivery, if your USP is ensuring better customer services, so obviously you will be having a competitive advantage over the others, right? So that is what is your bargaining power, that could act as your bargaining power. So customer services, when we are talking about, they are very much relevant when we are deciding upon which mode of transportation is to be used. Sometimes typical mode of transportation is generally being asked by the importer itself. He asks for, or the goods are to be sent via airways only, or the goods are to be sent by this shipping lines only. So then there are different segregation, whether they want to indulge into what sort of carrier, or what sort of your Incoterms are being involved into the same. So that's totally a different domain. So when we are talking about the mode of transportation, choosing from different modes of transportation, we actually are very cautious of different parameters, of different factors that may influence the choices, right? Similarly, when we are, talking about this thing, the another parameter that we keep into account is your environmental factors. So why environmental factors? Because globally, the customers are more cautious, they are more concerned about the environment, they are more concerned about the Mother Earth, right? So that is why whatever mode of transportation you are picking up, it also takes into account the carbon footprints it is generating, or the carbon emissions it is generating. So that is why when choosing from different modes of your transportation, a person has to be very considerate upon different parameters, different factors, right? Since obviously the aim of your ITIL always stands the same, it stands that you should, or one should ensure the type of your utility. Type of utility means when we are talking about international trade logistics now, there always stands that you need to ensure these very forms of your utility. That means you have to ensure the time utility. Time utility means the goods should be delivered well in time. So that means, if, as I was giving an example of your this key, if a package is to be delivered by 22nd of August, so it has to be delivered by 22nd of August. That is what we means, that is what is an effective logistical infrastructure which is ensuring this particular utility from indulging any mode of your transportation. Then form, that means the right goods. If we talk about in a very simple sentence, it means right goods should reach right place to the right person in the right time, right? That means right goods in the right form. So if you are sending something which loses its essence or loses its freshness, right? So then there is no point of claiming on to that this form of your utility is attained. So if you are serving the markets, you have to ensure that not just you are making sure that the goods reaches well in time to the right person, to the right place, but also into the right form, right? For example, if we are talking about the flowers, if by the time it reaches to the point of destination, they loses their essence, they loses their aroma, they loses their fragrance, then there's no point of saying that the saying or pitching for the same that yes, the goods have reached well in time, because it has lost its essence. So that is why all these forms of your utility should be ensured when we are deciding upon which particular mode of transportation is to be utilized, right? So there are different factors, as I talked upon, when we are deciding upon which mode of your transportation is to be opted from. So there stands the importer's choice and bargaining power. So when we are talking about importer's choice and bargaining power, that means what is the bargaining power of your importers. So that means there could be some incoterms which are there within the agreement. So that also becomes one of the crucial factor when deciding upon which mode of transportation is to be taken up. So importer's choice in bargaining power here means that your customer is having the higher degree of your bargaining power. He is in a better position. He is in a better position. That means whatever contract terms you are having, it has the elements wherein it mentions the choices by the importer, that whether the shipping mode of transportation is to be used, then what sort of goods will be taken up, or what sort of vessel is to be taken up for the further delivery. So that ways your importer's choice and its bargaining power with respect to different incoterms that are mentioned into the agreement, that are mentioned into the contract between the importer and the exporter, they had to be very carefully being taken care of. Then we talk about the nature of your cargo. Now when we say that what is the nature of your cargo, that means again The goods are such which requires a specific temperature. The goods are such which are, let's say perishable in nature. The goods are such which are heavier in nature. The goods are such, let's say, which are hazardous in nature, right? Or they are fragile, or it requires special handling care, or the goods are such that they are to be taken up into roll-on, roll-off, containers. So accordingly, depending upon what is the type of your cargo, whether a reefer container is required for the same, because reefer container means refrigerated containers, and they will be required if you have to maintain a particular degree of temperatures in case of your fruits and vegetables, or exotic fruits and vegetables for that sake, right? So that ways it depends on to what is your cargo, what is its nature, and then to goods are perishable into nature or non-perishable, right? The goods are flammable into nature or inflammable, right? The goods are fragile or they can be easily taken care of. The goods require some sort of specific dimensions that are to be taken care of, to be cautious of, because if if they are being very specific dimensions, then accordingly the arrangements for loading and unloading of the cargo at the port is to be made, right? You have to be have special you could say equipments, sort of your special you could say truckers, or instead of manual labor you are using the forklifters for the same. So accordingly arrangements are to be done, right? Similarly, how much bulkier your cargo is, right? How much heavier the cargo is, how much costlier the cargo is, and these things decide upon what will be your mode of transportation. आप अगर you are sending, let's suppose, high-end jewelry, so you have to be very cautious about the same. You have to take into consideration, because since the jewelry is one segment which is which is not perishable but which is costlier, which is a high valued good. So you have to be very cautious whether it has to be sent via an airway mode or whether be the shipping mode, because shipping mode compared to your airways would take definitely a longer period of time to deliver the same, right? So accordingly you have to make your choices, right? And then too, when we are talking about that different modes of transportation, another component that comes into point is your type of your packing material. Now when we say the packing material, if the goods are such which are fragile into nature, so you will you will be using the dunnage. Dunnage means sort of your bubble sheet wrap which is there for the cushioning of the cargo. So while you require the usage of the same or not, right, in packing the goods. Now if the goods are fragile, the goods has to be packed in a certain manner, and they have to be placed in a certain manner onto the vessel, or talking about otherwise through airways. So supposingly you want to send some bolts, right? So bolts are first sent into small, as I mentioned into the last very segment where we talked about different aspects of your storage and the packaging also, and packing also. So we did talked about those small boxes, right? So supposingly I was giving this reference of your bolts and nuts. So those bolts and nuts are kept into a small box, and then all these small boxes into, let's say, they are packed up into a big box. So the big box contains 10 small boxes, wherein into each small box there is, let's say, 100 units of your bolts and nuts, right? Now again those big boxes containing 10 small boxes, so such similar, let's say, 20 boxes or 50 boxes, they are to be unitized. Unitization is basically what? It is the grouping or consolidation of smaller units, right? And then you're placing all the cargo, all the smaller units and consolidating them up so that it is very easier to transport the same, right? And in case of unitization, another benefit is that there stands higher chances of, or higher feasibility that all the cargo will be intact. There will be no theft, there will be no, losing any smaller units into that shipment. So through that unitization process, that is also ensured. So when talking about, different modes of your transportation, we have to be very careful, very savvy of this, aspect, that the goods are such whether they are fragile. If they are fragile, they are to be carefully handled. The goods are such, they are to be, unitized, they are to be placed on a pallet, which is known as your, palletization, or such which can be unit load, carried up onto a unit load devices. So depending on to the same, what sort of packing requirements does it require, you choose the mode of your transportation. Then you could say that, you are talking, or you should be, careful of how easy it will be to carry the cargo, as I was mentioning, because depending upon what is the volume, what is the dimensions of the cargo, you can decide upon whether it is easy to lift the cargo or load the cargo or unload the same, right? Whether forklifters are required or not, whether some sort of, strapping for the same is required or not, bolting is required or not. So accordingly you will decide upon that, what all are the crucial factors that decide upon the mode of your transportation. Then, we always talk about one segment, that is your pestle analysis. So pestle analysis here means that, political, economic, social, technological, environmental and legal. So, all these factors also play a crucial role when deciding upon the mode of transportation, because these all things, frame out the regulations, they frame out the rules. So that is why it is very crucial to, to be very, you could say, careful about the regulations which are there into the internal and the external environment. So you need to run that SWOT analysis, you have to go for that pestle analysis, and through that only you will be easily, able to decide upon that which mode of your transportation is to be, chosen up, right? Because it's not just the time, it's also the cost, it's also the type of your article, it's also the rules and regulations, it also the packing requirements, it's also the handling requirements that are to be taken care of when deciding upon which mode of transportation is to be picked up, right? So as we are talking about, the mode of transportation, another factor that can also be, you could say worth, significance is your transit time. Now the longer the distance, the lower your, the fare or the charges, right? So that is why when, we are serving the heavier bulk, or we are, exporting the heavier bulk, we look into account that we prefer for the ship rate, shipways, right? Similarly, if longer the distance being, right, we know that the distance, if it is longer, then there will be correspondingly lower charges. So we have to be also very, cautious about the transit time that it is taking, and then accordingly, you can decide upon the various mode of your transportation. You can also be very careful of the extra charges that we call upon the cost, insurance and freight, and the documentation charges, because when we are talking about international, markets, the documentation is one factor that indulges a lot of amount of your cost. So you have to be very careful of the extra charges that you are supposed to pay while, opting for different modes, out of the different modes of your transportation. So these are the, quite a factors that should be considered when deciding upon the mode of transportation. So thank you. We'll be continuing the segment in the coming sections, right? So thank you for the day.